Has it really been 2 years since I first started Set Point? Indeed it has. What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you the 2-year anniversary special of Set Point. And we have a jam-packed show for you all, as last weekend we had 9 upsets regarding ranked teams. Yes, 9 upsets. Who were those teams, and what happened? And we also witnessed history as Cal State Bakersfield registered its first ever Big West Conference win over a Big West Conference foe they had never beaten. Who was the opponent, and what happened in that match that helped them clinch the victory? Also, it is the 2-year anniversary special of Set Point, and I'm going to be doing a Q&A, so drop your questions if you haven't already. So set up the net, hand me a volleyball, because I'm about to serve up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you the 2-year anniversary special of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point, the 2-year anniversary special. Honestly, it feels like yesterday that I first went live with Set Point. It really does. I can't believe it. And the first ever words that I uttered were, "What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez." And I remember my first ever episode of Set Point like it was yesterday. Honestly, I was kind of a nervous wreck, and I couldn't really, keep my sentences straight, and I was nervous, and it felt so weird having to do a show by myself. I mean, I had practice prior, but it just felt rather weird. So, that's kind of my little opening spiel, my opening monologue of Set Point. But without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. But first, we have a word from our sponsors. Our first sponsor for IE Sports Radio is the Southern California Warriors semi-pro football team. Congratulations to the Warriors as they earned a 26-12 victory over the Las Vegas Saints. And that's a big victory considering they had lost to the Saints earlier in the season, so the fact that they avenged that loss and got the win on their home turf is absolutely amazing. So good job, Warriors. I'm very proud of you, and they're also back to 500 as they are at 3-3, and things are looking up for the Warriors. I can't wait for the next game. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get filmed to try out for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get that second chance you have been waiting for as an athlete. You can follow the SoCal Warriors on Twitter at SoCal Warriors. You can follow them on Instagram at SouthernCalifornia_Warriors. You can follow them on Facebook by typing the word Southern California and Warriors in the search bar. The second sponsor for IE Sports Radio is Background Check International Businesses. Are you looking to background check a new hire on? Let Kit Fremen take care of that for you. Kit founded and has managed Background Check International since 1994, and he's here to help you with the screening process. Contact Kit and let him help make the hiring process that much easier. Just as a side note, however, this business is used for professional background checks and not for the use of any crimes such as identity theft or any other illegal activity. You could follow Background Check International Businesses on the Book of Faces by typing in the word background, then the word check, and then international, and then put a nice little dash there and put BCI. You could also follow them on their website, www.bcint.com. So thank you to Background Check International Businesses and the SoCal Warriors for being the official sponsors of IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. And you can follow IE Sports Radio on Twitter at IE Sports Radio. You can follow them on Instagram at IE Sports Radio, and you can also follow them on Facebook by typing in the word IE and the word sports and then radio. Now, without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. And I'm going to try to push this along just because we have a lot of upsets to go on, to recap. And then we also have this little history, and then we'll go from there. So we'll start with the history first. So last weekend, I attended the Long Beach State Cal State Bakersfield women's volleyball match, and both teams were coming off of losses in their conference opener. Bakersfield lost to Cal State Fullerton, while Long Beach lost to Cal Poly. So this was rather quite the fascinating matchup. This was the battle of who will get their first Big West Conference win first. And in the first set, it was neck and neck, but Long Beach State was not able to catch up to Bakersfield, as Bakersfield did a really good job of limiting Long Beach's big-time hitters. In the first set, I don't even think Kashana Williams, and yes, this did actually happen, Kashana Williams of Long Beach State didn't even have a kill in that first set, so that's rather impressive of what Bakersfield did. As for Bakersfield themselves, they just did everything right. They served the ball well, they put pressure on the Long Beach State defense. Their block was good. It was just really impressive stuff for Bakersfield as they took the opening set 25-22. The second set belonged to Long Beach for the most part, but there were 11 ties and 6 lead changes as Long Beach was finally starting to get into a rhythm as Kashana Williams finally got hers, and then she also got great contributions from Katie Kennedy, Miranda Cañez, Erica Lovett, and Cameron Bacon. So for the second set, it looked as if Bakersfield was actually going to rally back and win the set, but Long Beach State, being the talented team that they are, put the match away. So good on the beach for them. So they took the second set 25-23, so good job to Long Beach State for taking that set. The third set, however, belonged to Bakersfield as they never trailed and there were no ties as they took the third set 25-16. They were just, once again, they were doing everything right. Like, it was tough to fault Bakersfield based on the job that they were doing. Once again, they were limiting Long Beach State in terms of their pin hitters. They were playing sound, solid defense, and they were serving tough, and Long Beach State didn't really have a correct answer for them. The fourth set, it looked as if Long Beach State was going to force a fifth set, but then Bakersfield managed to turn the tables, and they led for the most part. But credit to Long Beach State, they made one final push to try to get the set to being tied and possibly force a fifth set. Unfortunately for Long Beach State, Bakersfield was able to get their last 2 points, courtesy of Haley McCluskey, as Bakersfield took the fourth set 25-22 and the match, and it was their first ever Big West Conference victory. So good stuff for Bakersfield. It was actually their first ever victory over Long Beach State. So prior to that, they were 0-3 against the Beach, but Bakersfield was able to get the victory and celebrate in extreme happy fashion. After the game, I caught up with Haley McCluskey on the big-time victory over Long Beach State. All right, Haley, your team just won its first ever Big West Conference game, and you beat Long Beach State for the first time in team history. What just went through your mind when you got that match-clinching kill?
Just to put it away for the team. We worked super hard. We had an incredible preseason, and we just came tonight ready to win, super focused, and that's all that was going through my mind as my team.
You all had a tough one against Cal State Fullerton, but you all were able to limit Kashana Williams and just limit their pin hitters. What do you think you all did better in this match as opposed to yesterday?
I think we stayed together as a team. We really focused on the game plan, and again, just sticking together. That's what was the big changer from last night to tonight, was sticking together as a team and having each other's backs.
You also got contributions from Malika Vukobrot. What can you say about her gameplay and how she was able to get kill after kill just like you?
Oh, she played absolutely incredible. She's a stud. She stays in the game. She's family focused, and that's what we're all about, and that's how she continued to get kill after kill.
Other than the third set, every set was pretty tight as it was basically back and forth, and it even got to the point where media timeouts were called. Like, what can you say about the intensity of this match and how the Big West Conference is a whole different animal?
It's very different than the conference that we were in, but we've prepared a long time for this in our preseason and in practice and our game planning. So those types of timeouts didn't bother us. It just made us focus even more.
How big is this win for you all as you continue through the conference?
Oh, it's huge. This is what we're going to continue to do, and we're just going to take this as our first win and continue to grind and continue to work in practice and continue to be a team and push forward.
And despite getting the win, what are things that you think your team can work on as you have games next week?
I think just the same thing, sticking together, being focused. We call ourselves Ramley for Roadrunner Family, and so we're just going to continue to keep doing that.
All right, thank you, Haley.
Okay.
So Haley McCluskey finished with 9 kills. She was second behind Malika Vukobrot, who had 10 kills. As a whole, Bakersfield didn't hit that high of a hitting percentage, as they only hit 180, which isn't terrible. I mean, the fact that both teams' defense were absolutely flying all over the place, and they were able to just make sure the ball didn't hit the floor, and they were just limiting the opposing team. It just goes to show you that you don't need offense in order to get the victory, as Bakersfield did just that. Now I caught up with Bakersfield coach Giovanna Mello and how she was able to express how she felt during the match and how big of a win this was over Long Beach State. All right, so your team picked up its first ever Big West Conference win, and you beat Long Beach State for the first time in team history. What is going through your mind after your team put forth a great effort on the road to get the W?
I'm just extremely proud of them. They showed a lot of resilience especially after coming from, yesterday losing to Fullerton. They were a completely different team today, and I'm extremely proud of them.
Obviously, you talked about the Fullerton loss. The fact that it was a quick turnaround and the fact that you all had to get focused against a very talented Long Beach team, what were the ways you were able to make the great changes in this match?
I think our team has been a team that, we constantly talk about them being in a moment, and that's what they did today, and that's what we did not do yesterday. So I think that was the biggest change in here, and we really played together as a team throughout the whole match.
Your team limited Kashana as she wasn't her big dominant self. Was that the game plan to slow down Kashana Williams and make everyone else a hitter?
Absolutely, that was our big game plan, to put our best blocker against their best hitter.
How long have you been head coach of Bakersfield?
This is my 8th year.
How big is this win for you all, and do you think this is the biggest win of your program?
Honestly, it is in comparison of teams that we have played that have a higher, a caliber of team. We have obviously won some conference championships, but the kind of win that it happened today is the first time ever.
Malika, Haley, and a few other pin hitters had and Celicia was able to have big nights for you all. What can you say about your offensive output tonight?
Yeah, I think that they were pretty balanced, and Lisa did a great job running the offense.
Yeah, and Celicia also just pretty much did everything. She was blocking the ball, she was digging the ball, she was getting aces, she was spiking the ball, she was setting the ball. What can you say about your setter and how big she was in this hostile road environment?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it was a team win. We rarely have been focusing on the team, but I think she had a great night, and she was ready for it, and I'm excited for her, and I'm proud of her.
You're 8-2 going into next week. What do you think there are things that you want to change going into the future of Big West Conference play?
Nothing. I just want to keep getting better every day that we step on the court and focusing on the moment as we have been doing.
And then obviously this is the first two matches of a tough conference. Like, what's it going to take to topple some of the other teams like Cal Poly, Hawaii, Santa Barbara, etc.?
Yeah, we got to continue to get better. I think that's the focus. As you know, this group knows that we got to continue to get better every day in every skill, and we will continue to do that.
And that was Giovanna Mello, the head coach of Cal State Bakersfield women's volleyball. So it was indeed a big victory for the Roadrunners as they improved to 8-2 going into this week. It was a very impressive victory, and honestly, they earned it. Like, they were just all over the place, and they wanted to win. And I'm not saying that Long Beach State did not want to win, but they had a passion, because coming off of a tough 4-set loss to Cal State Fullerton is rough, especially since I think Bakersfield could have beaten Fullerton. But honestly, I think that Bakersfield winning this match is rather impressive. One stat that did stand out to me from Bakersfield is their blocks. They had 15 blocks as a team compared to Long Beach State's 9. So that was a glaring stat, which limited Long Beach State to only a 119 hitting percentage. That's not going to get the job done. Another stat that was alarming for Long Beach State was that they missed 14 serves, and that was very cringeworthy. I'm sure Joy Mackenzie Furbringer was not too pleased with that. And despite the low hitting percentage, Long Beach State did get contributions from Kashawn Williams, who had 13 kills. They got 11 kills apiece from Katie Kennedy, Erica Lovett, and Miranda Cañas. And then Cameron Bacon had 9 kills, so she almost cracked double digits. So all in all, for Long Beach State, their offense looked good despite Kashawn having a quiet night. And something else that occurred was that Long Beach State had quite the number of hitting errors. They had 37 compared to Bakersfield's 18. Basically, Long Beach State had double the amount of hitting errors that Bakersfield had. So after the match, I caught up with Joy Mackenzie Furbringer and a few of the Long Beach State women's volleyball players after the loss to Bakersfield in the Long Beach State press conference.
Good afternoon. We're going to start the press conference with an opening statement from head coach Joy Mackenzie Furbringer. Then we'll open up to questions for Coach Jenna Giambi and Miranda Cañas. Coach, go ahead.
Tough weekend for the Beach. I was hoping after last night's loss that our team would have responded differently today, but kudos to Bakersfield, and also kudos to Bakersfield. They had a good game plan against us. They made us do some things that we were uncomfortable with, and we took a while to adjust. We did do some adjustments, but just couldn't get into our rhythm. And so, again, kudos to Bakersfield and Cal Poly last night. Cal Poly did the same thing. They had a good game plan. They made us do some things that we were uncomfortable doing, and we just didn't make adjustments.
Questions for Coach.
Good afternoon, Joy. All right, so obviously this was a tough loss, but did you find any silver linings to today and yesterday's loss by chance?
I think for us it's going back to the drawing board, getting some kids healthy. I think we'll get a couple kids back this week, which will help us in the gym, and we've got to go back and learn from these losses. So, I guess the silver lining is back to the drawing board, and hope we get a couple players that can help us out there on the court.
Your offense was pretty balanced today. What can you say about your offense and how it was pretty much even in most of the aspects, whether it was outside hitter, right side hitter, or middle?
I thought we got good offense out of our middles. Both middles were effective, made Bakersfield pay attention to them a little bit. I just thought, the distribution was good. We just didn't get good sets and tempo to our pins and get them open. And again, kudos to Bakersfield. I thought they did a really good job blocking.
Bakersfield being in its first year in the Big West Conference, how big of a win do you think this is for them, and what do you think the adjustments will be when you face them, even though you're not going to look at them too far along the road?
I think from their reaction, it was a big win. I think it was something that they didn't expect, and down the road, for us, we got to go back to the drawing board and we got to work harder in the gym. We got to get a couple of healthy bodies back and see if they can contribute.
Dylan De La Cruz, I saw her playing some setter. What can you say about the versatility from her and how she could play not only defensive specialist, but setter and libero as well?
Yeah, Dylan's a great ball control kid and knows the game. She brings us a lot of experience in the setting position, in the passing, and defensively. So, Dylan is just a big asset for us. We didn't go in expecting Dylan to do a lot of setting because we thought we had that covered in that position, but with a couple people out, we've kind of tried to adjust, and Dylan's, like I said, is a good volleyball player. She can adjust to anything.
And what were some positives that you found in tonight's match despite the loss?
Again, I guess I'll just repeat. I thought we had some good play out of our middles. I thought in the fourth we responded a little bit better than we did in the third and started competing. In the third, what I thought is we didn't respond very well. We got quiet. But the fourth, I saw a little bit of fire. I thought we were going to get that fourth and take it to 5, but unfortunately couldn't close that out.
And the next up is Cal State Fullerton. That's pretty much one of your longtime rivals. What's it going to take to defeat the Titans here in the Pyramid? And have you studied a little film on them as of late?
We have not studied film. I've watched a little bit because they did play Bakersfield. They beat them, I believe, in 4. And both teams are very scrappy. They're good at what they do. So, it's any team that we go against in the Big West is going to be a challenge for us. We're going to have to play at a higher level than we are now.
All right, thank you, Joy. All right, so basically the message from Joy McKenzie Furbringer was they got to go back to the drawing board. And I don't blame her for saying that, just because losing to 2 conference opponents at home is tough, especially since you look at the body of work that Long Beach State has had. Yes, they've played a lot of good opponents like Washington State, Georgia Tech, and UCLA, but they've only had one true upset win, and that was against San Diego. And depending on how San Diego does in the West Coast Conference could, hence the word could, impact Long Beach State's chances of making it as an at-large team in the postseason. The Big West Conference has taken more than one team, as in 2019 they had UC Santa Barbara, Cal Poly, which were both at-large teams, and then you also had Hawaii, which made it as the conference champion. So I wouldn't doubt Long Beach State after this loss, especially since there's a lot of conference play to go, but that loss on Saturday kind of left a bad taste in their mouth. So I caught up with Jenna Giambi during the press conference, and she talked about the match against Bakersfield.
Freshman Jenna Giambi, defensive specialist. Any questions for Jenna?
Good afternoon, Jenna. So obviously this was a tough loss for you all, losing to Bakersfield and losing your second in a row. What do you think some silver linings or positives you can take away from this game going into next week are?
I know one thing we were talking about in the locker room as soon as we got back in there is just like having that spark, and I think that's one thing we were missing tonight. So I know definitely we want to have like more talks as a team and just kind of get that spark going again and like that fire, because we started to get it in the 4th set, but by then it was already too late. So as long as we start that off like as soon as we start the game, then I think we'll really grow from that.
You were getting subbed in and rotating quite a bit with Kashana. Like, what was going through your head knowing that you were going to have to dig balls and serve tough against a talented Bakersfield team?
Yeah, anytime I get to go in, I guess, like, Cash is an amazing player, but I love going in for her and, like, being able to help out the team. So I think anytime I go in, I just want to, like, do whatever I can for the team, especially that one on game point. I was like, I got to come in right now and just do what I can. So, yeah, I have a lot of fun out there. I enjoy the team a lot, and, yeah.
Obviously, you as a defense specialist, you look up to certain players. Like, what can you say about Nicole and how she was just digging everything left and right?
Yeah, I love playing next to Nicole. She's an amazing teammate. She constantly helps you out on the court, tells you what to do, is amazing. So it's really nice to play next to her and have her get all those balls because it makes my job easier. So yeah, I love playing with her.
And then you all dropped both games in your conference openers. What do you think the team needs to do in order to adjust and go forward? Because you have a big week coming up with, I think, 3 matches.
Silly me, I said 3 when in reality it was actually 2.
Enough about that. Back to the conference.
Yeah, I think we're really excited for this next week, and I think we kind of need to take the weekend to reset our minds, reset whatever we need to do on the court, and use these 2 last games as a learning experience. We need to figure out what went wrong, and we need to figure out what we can do to win these games because we know we can. So yeah.
And then Fullerton comes into town on Tuesday. It's a Tuesday match, and you've already played one of those Tuesday matches. What's it going to take to defeat the Titans and get your first conference win?
I think it's going to take everyone coming together on the court. I think when we all come together, one of our new things we started is everyone holding on to the huddle. I think that's a really good thing we started, and as long as we're all out there all playing together, I think we could win.
Senior.
All right, so yeah, and that's what I saw quite a bit when it came to Jenna. She, only being a freshman, was rotating in for Kashana. Kashana Williams does have that big, heavy topspin jump serve, but most of those serves can be hit or miss. Sometimes they'll either go sail out of bounds or they'll hit into the net. But sometimes you gotta take your hits with your misses, and I was a little surprised that Joy Mackenzie Furbringer wasn't rolling the dice. But in all reality, Kashana wasn't having her best night, and it happens to a player. So I give Joy kudos for subbing in Jenna, and she, only being a freshman, was doing all that she can to try to keep Long Beach State in the game. And it's tough when you're facing a talented team such as Bakersfield. So caught up with Miranda Cañas in the press conference, and she talked about the Bakersfield Long Beach State women's volleyball match.
Blocker, Miranda Cañas. Any questions for Miranda?
Good afternoon, Miranda. Obviously, this was a rough loss for you all. What do you think your team did correctly that you could take into next week as you have some big matches against some big-time opponents?
Kind of just going back to what Jenna said, when we started our pregame talk with Matt, he said holding the huddle. So just even if it's not a volleyball aspect, just coming together as a team, I think we did a better job at that. And just trying to, anything in that huddle, just to go and use that energy to go and fight on the court.
Sets 1, 2, and 4 were fairly close as it was decided by less than 5 points. What do you think there are things that your team can tweak in order to win those close sets and not put yourself in a precarious situation?
One thing that we always are working on in practice is just serve, receive, and just serving. You can win games by serving well, and we're always going to keep pushing to get teams out of system and just going back to the drawing board and working on our serving.
What do you think Bakersfield did on their side of the net as opposed to you all to win the match?
I think that they stuck to their game plan pretty well, whatever that was. It took us a little to start adjusting to that, so going back in, coming with Fullerton, just learning the game plan, knowing it ahead of time, and just from the very first point, start sticking with it.
The offense was balanced today as you, Kashana, Katie, Erica, and Cameron all had some good kills, and you basically paced the team. What can you say about the offense and how you all were distributive?
I think it was nice to, obviously, Cash can kill a ball. I mean, we've seen her, she's amazing. But it's nice to be able to kind of, with the other team, fooling them, getting the other people involved. It just makes them not have Cash carry so much weight. We all can help her carry that weight.
And then Tia obviously was distributing the ball, and even she was taking a few swings. What can you say about Tia and her leadership and how she was doing everything she can in order to help you all win?
I think it's really nice whenever we get to have Dylan come in and set too. I think first off it throws their blockers off because you just see little Dylan come in. But I think it was nice to have Tia swing because she can see the court very well. She's a very good player. And so it's always nice to have her be able to see what she sees and put the ball down for us when she can, setting or hitting.
All right, thank you, Miranda.
Thank you.
All right, and that was the interview with Miranda Cañas, Jenna Giambi, and Joy Mackenzie Furbringer. Yeah, it was a tough one for the Beach. I thought they could have played a whole lot better. Their hitting was just obviously not that up to par, and they just didn't have that big hit within them. Like, when you're hitting 119 and you're getting blocked 15 times, you're going to struggle quite a bit. But the good thing is that they got their offense balanced. I think what should have been the red flag for Long Beach State was that Kashana was getting blocked quite a bit, and they needed to fool the Bakersfield blockers into not just closing in on Kashana, but just closing in on everybody. And obviously Bakersfield did a great job defensively, and I give kudos to them. I could see Bakersfield possibly making it as an at-large team if, for some odd reason, they don't win the Big West Conference Championship. The good thing for Long Beach State is that they bounced back as they earned a 3-set win over Cal State Fullerton this past Tuesday. Tomorrow, which is Friday, Long Beach State is hitting the road to Hawaii to take on the Rainbow Wahine. That's going to be a big-time matchup. Hawaii is undefeated. They're 2-0. This could be a real tough one for Long Beach State because Hawaii doesn't really lose in Stan Sheriff Center. So for the Beach, they're just going to have to come out ready to play, and they're going to have to just go hard every day, and they've got to make sure they don't miss too many serves. So that's going to do it for my night at Long Beach State. So we have a lot of upsets on our hands when it came to last week. We had 9 upsets in terms of ranked teams. Honestly, I'm going to debut I'm going to call this next little segment called Quick Sets. And basically, I'll talk about the matches or the upsets that happened in quick fashion. So, start with Wednesday between Colorado and Washington State. Washington State was unranked while Colorado was ranked number 24. Colorado was also undefeated. Washington State swept Colorado in 3 sets. The stat that stands out to me the most was the hitting from Washington State. They hit 274. They had 2 players with 10 kills, 1 player with 9 kills. And despite getting outdug 58-45, Washington State really performed well, as their blocking was slightly better. They also had 8 service aces. I gotta give credit to Washington State, and you have to also give credit to Washington State as a whole, considering they played a very tough schedule. They played a schedule that featured a lot of NCAA tournament teams. Their first 4 matches were against South Carolina, which was, obviously they didn't make the tournament, but they are very good. They played UNLV, they played Penn State, and they played Georgia Tech. They played Purdue, my apologies. And then they wound up losing all those matches. But ever since those first 4 games, Washington State has yet to lose a match. Now, I'll be talking about Washington State in a little bit. So, big ups to Washington State. Colorado, in my opinion, I kind of saw that they were going to have a tough time against Washington State. You look at their body of work prior to Pac-12 play, it did not stack up to the competition that Washington State had. So that was that right there for Washington State and Colorado. Also on Tuesday, we had Utah upsetting Washington at the Alaska Airlines Arena. This one was a 5-set thriller where Utah won that 5th set 16-14. Utah was paced by Danny Drews. That was the stat that stood out. She had 26 kills. She did have 11 hitting errors, but as a whole, Utah hit 227. Washington, on the other hand, was a little bit more balanced, as Maren Grote and Claire Hoffman each had 16 kills. Utah outdug Washington 78-71. And in terms of blocks, they were in favor of Washington by a little. And as a team, Utah hit 227 to Washington's 205, which wasn't too bad, but still, it was kind of surprising to see Washington lose to Utah. So, and then we had this upset on Friday. We had Mississippi State taking down then number 17 Florida. Florida has been reeling as of late. They've lost to a few opponents that they should have probably beaten. They beat Mississippi State the night before in 5 sets, but in this match, Florida lost in 5 sets. Mississippi State was led by Shania Cromartie, as she had 25 kills. and whatnot, as that was the stat that stood out to me. Also, Mississippi State hitting 260 was pretty impressive as well, and then tying them. And despite being outblocked 15-9, Mississippi State was able to get the victory, as they also only had one service ace. So good stuff for Mississippi State. I'm surprised Florida, with all the stats going for them, they wound up losing at Florida. You never really see Florida losing too many times at the Swamp, so I'm rather disappointed in Florida. They have been underachieving as of late. So we say hello to Marcus Losgreat in the chat room. He says, happy 2-year anniversary. Thank you, Marcus, and great show yesterday. I got to catch a little of it, so good job, and I appreciate the well wishes. So next up on our quick sets, we have Ohio State falling to Purdue. I had a feeling Ohio State was not going to get the win over Purdue. Purdue has had their number for quite some time, and last season was no different. This was played in Purdue at West Lafayette, but Purdue won in 5 sets. They only had 2 players that reached double digits in terms of kills, as they had Caitlin Newton and Grace Cleveland each totaling 15 kills. As a team, Purdue only hit 214, and they tied Ohio State in terms of digs with 82, but the block was there for them, as they outblocked the Buckeyes 11-6, as Ohio State just couldn't pull out the win. Emily Landot led the team in kills with 20, but she also had 17 hitting errors. That's another glaring stat that stood out to me. 17 hitting errors for Emily Landot. She had over half of Ohio State's hitting errors. Half! And she only hit 48 on the night, so that wasn't too impressive. Gabby Gonzalez added 14 kills, while Arca Davis and Mia Grunzi added 11 kills apiece. So all in all, for Ohio State, they kind of got exposed. Before then, I saw they were also exposed against Notre Dame. The fact that they had to go 5 against a sub-500 Notre Dame team speaks to high volumes of how, other than facing Texas State and Washington, they did not have the most impressive preseason or non-conference slate. Back to Pac-12 play on Sunday, we had Utah squaring off against Colorado, where Colorado avenged its loss against Washington State on Wednesday, and they defeated Colorado in 3 sets. And this was actually on Friday, my apologies, not Sunday. So Colorado defeated Utah in 3 sets. The third set was the closest, being 25-23, but Colorado controlled this matchup. This is a rivalry game, and Colorado was coming off of a tough loss, but I kind of got to give it up to Colorado. It kind of shows that they do belong in the ranked category, but in my opinion, they still need to prove themselves. Colorado was led by Leah Clayton, who had 15 kills. She only had 2 hitting errors, and then Maya Tabron had 13 kills, only 1 hitting error. Those two really paced the team well. As a team, Colorado hit 351, and that was kind of the glaring stat that stood out to me, as well as Colorado outdigging Utah 49-36. Very good stuff. Colorado also outblocked Utah 7-4. So good stuff for Colorado. Utah was led by Madeline Robinson, who had a good stat line. She had 12 kills. She hit 407. She only had 1 hitting error. Danny Drews, on the other hand, did not have the best night, as she only had 8 kills, which was the 3rd most, and she had a hitting percentage of -29, and she had 9 hitting errors. So that really did not do Utah that good. And they also hit 170 as a team, so they can't do that against a rival like Colorado. Going back to the Big Ten was this big upset. Number 2 Wisconsin fell to then undefeated Maryland. Maryland was 12-0 going into this match, and they weren't ranked, but Maryland was able to secure the upset over number 2 Wisconsin, which was very impressive. Maryland was led by Sam Sire, who had 17 kills. She only had 4 hitting errors, which was quite impressive. Paula Nessaporuka had 15 kills, As a team, Maryland only hit 195, but they blocked the ball really well. They had 15 blocks compared to Wisconsin's 9, so I was very impressed about Maryland's block. And this just goes to show you that Maryland deserves some recognition, and it also goes to show that Wisconsin is not as indestructible as many people think. Though Wisconsin has played a pretty tough schedule. They played Kentucky, they played Marquette, but they played Dayton a couple times, but they haven't had the big-time competition like some of these other teams have. As for Wisconsin, they were led by Denny Redke, who had 20 kills. She only had 2 hitting errors. Julia Orzol had 15 kills, and in only 4 sets, Lauren Jardine had 13 kills, and Grace Loberg added 9 kills. Overall, it just wasn't... something else that Wisconsin did incorrectly was that they didn't serve the ball well. They had 17 service errors compared to only 3 for Maryland, and I was very surprised at that happening. So, a little uncharacteristic on Wisconsin's part, but Maryland was licking their chops at this matchup, so good for Maryland for pulling off the win. Let's jump back to the Pac-12, where we had UCLA reverse sweeping Stanford on Sunday. Like I said, UCLA was down 2-0 in the match. They dropped the first 2 sets by scores of 25-18, but then they wound up winning the next 2 sets by a combined 4 points, meaning both of those sets were combined by 2 points. And then the 5th set, UCLA had all the momentum, and they were able to pick up the win as they won the 5th set 15-9. So, good job for UCLA. I didn't think they'd actually pull the upset in Maples Pavilion. They went a perfect 2-0, and that's very promising. The thing that stood out to me was Charity Looper leading the way with 18 kills. She only had 2 hitting errors, and that was great for her because, believe it or not, Mac May had a somewhat forgetful night. She had 12 kills, but she had 13 hitting errors. That's not going to help win the match for your team. And then also got to give a little props to Iman Njai, who had 9 kills. As a team, UCLA outblocked... Well, actually, no. Surprisingly, Stanford outblocked UCLA as they had 20 and a half blocks to UCLA's 13. And UCLA only hit 161 compared to Stanford's 227, which was also quite surprising. And they only outdug Stanford by 3, 57-54. As for Stanford, they were led by Kendall Kipp, who had 16 kills. Her hitting percentage was pretty good with 364. Katie Baird and Sammy Francis each had 14 and 12 kills respectively, but it just wasn't good enough as the Cardinal fell to UCLA, so tough one. Especially since UCLA defeated Stanford in football, so there was that. And then also back to the Big Ten, we had number 20 Penn State upsetting number 3 Ohio State in straight sets. This was kind of a grudge game for Penn State because they lost both matchups last season to Ohio State, but this time Penn State got the revenge in State College, aka the Rep Call. Penn State was led by Adonna Rollins and Johnny Parker, who had 14 and 12 kills. Also got to give props to Erica Pritchard and Caitlin Horde, who had 9 and 8 kills respectively. Also got to give props to the Penn State block as they outblocked Ohio State 9-4, which was quite impressive. And Penn State also hit 380. Both teams had high hitting percentage. Ohio State's wasn't too high as they hit 269. They were led by Emily Landot, who had 17 kills, but she had 9 hitting errors, as she had over half of Ohio State's hitting errors, as Ohio State as a team had 16 hitting errors. Not that much, but still not good, if you ask me. So Ohio State has a lot to learn. They did pick up their first victory against Indiana this past week, so there was that. And then lastly, the second biggest upset this past weekend was Washington State upsetting Washington. Now, there are a lot of stats that stood out to me. The 4th set was won by Washington, but it was won by a grand total of 46-44. The two teams almost played 2 sets in 1 set. It was that crazy. And remember, the target score was 25, but you had to win by 2. So the fact that both teams were just insane in keeping the set going was absolutely bonkers. And another glaring stat in that set was 30 ties and 13 lead changes. Absolutely amazing stuff from both teams. A few stats that stood out to me individually was Tia Pimmer, who had 31 kills and a hitting percentage of .303, and she also chipped in 21 digs, so she got that 30-20. So great stuff from Timmer. She's become quite the leader for Washington State. As a team, Washington State also hit 250 compared to Washington's 159. That's another glaring stat that stood out to me. And then Washington State outblocked Washington 17-13. So that was also good. Sam Drexel led Washington in kills with 20, while Maren Grote and Imani Bush had 14 and 11 kills, respectively. As a team, Washington got outdug by Washington State 84-80. They got outblocked 17-13.5. And as a team, Washington, like I said, they only hit 159. So honestly, I don't know what happened with Washington. I thought they were better than this, but I guess not. You also have to give credit to Washington State. Once again, they did have that tough, brutal preseason, but Washington State was able to use that to their advantage, and they managed to turn the tide as they've now won 8 in a row, if I'm not mistaken. So good job to Washington State. Because the Pac-12 is really starting to be interesting. You have Washington, which is winless at 0-2 going into this weekend. Then you have UCLA at 2-0, having defeated Stanford and USC. And then you also have Washington State also having picked up 2 wins as well. So Washington State is starting to put themselves in the possible teams of winning the Pac-12 category. Washington State does have some big-time matches this weekend in the Pac-12 as they face the Southern California schools, which I'll be getting into a little bit, but that'll do it for the quick sets. Hopefully it was quick enough. Normally I spend almost an hour on these, so the fact that I was able to get it done in quite a good amount of time speaks to high volumes of how quick we wanted it to be. So now let's jump to the top 25 for this week, and there weren't too many changes. There were a few surprises. So 21 through 25. 25 we had San Diego. 24 we had Colorado. 23 Pepperdine, which barely beat Santa Clara, by the way. 22 is Florida. Yes, Florida has slipped all the way down. 21 is Western Kentucky. 16 through 20 we have 20 being Tennessee, Utah at 19, Georgia Tech at 18, Stanford at 17, and Creighton at 16. 11 through 15 consists of UCLA at 15, Penn State at 14, Washington at 13, Nebraska at 12, and Oregon at 11. 6 through 10 consists of BYU at 10, Baylor at 9, Ohio State at 8, Minnesota at 7, and Kentucky at 6. 5 through 1 consists of Wisconsin at 5, Purdue at 4, Louisville at 3, which being their highest they've been ranked in their team's history, Pitt at 2, which is tied for the most that they've been ranked in team history, and then number 1 is none other than Texas, which managed to sweep the living daylight out of Rice, which everyone thought that Rice had the chance for an upset, but Rice had other plans, and they got cooked by Texas. So that's your AVCA Women's Volleyball Top 25, and we'll take ourselves a quick little break. When we come back, we'll preview some of the noteworthy matches for this weekend, and also we have the Q&A segment, as you still have time to get your questions in, and you can ask me a whole lot along the way, as I'm willing to accept any and all questions, so long as they're appropriate. Otherwise, they just won't get read, and you will look like a fool. And you possibly will be a nominee for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show's Dum Dum of the Week. Regardless, we will take a commercial break, and when we come back, more Set Point action. You're listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
Puget Sound to the rushing waters of the Columbia River, stretching across the Great Cascades, and on IE Sports Radio lives the Northwest Territory Sports Show, hosted by me, Brad Buckingham. On this show, I cover all the great collegiate and professional sport teams that we have here in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, I'm talking about the Seattle Seahawks, Seattle Mariners, Sounders, and even the Seattle Kraken. But I can't forget all of that is good in Oregon either. I got the Trailblazers, the Oregon Ducks, the Beavers, even the Timbers, and much, much more. You can listen to the show every Sunday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, noon to 1 p.m. Pacific on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's good, fight fans? It's your boy, Marcus Los Great, here to give you what you want, here to give you what you need. Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm coming to you live, straight from your mama's basement with a crispy, awesome white tea. We're coming to you live every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Powered by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And we are back with segment number 2 of Set Point, the 2-year anniversary special. You can check out all of our amazing shows on several different streaming platforms such as Spreaker, Spotify, some are on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, YouTube, you name it. So now we are in segment number 2 of Set Point, as we will be previewing some of the noteworthy matches that'll be coming up this weekend. You also gotta go over some of the I'll briefly go over some of the matches that happened last night. One noteworthy matchup that happened was Ole Miss and Kentucky facing one another. Kentucky was able to grind it out and defeat Ole Miss in 5 sets, handing the Rebels their first loss of the season. So good for Kentucky as they stayed undefeated in conference play, but a rough one for Ole Miss, as I thought they were going to pull the upset, but unfortunately they fell just a little short. But it's all good for Ole Miss, as they're still having a fantastic season, having defeated Western Kentucky. Life will go on for them. Like I said, Ohio State defeated Indiana in their conference opener last night, so that too also happened. And honestly, I knew they were going to bounce back. I don't think they were not going to stay down for too long. So all in all, for Ohio State, they still have a long way to go, and this is a whole different animal. Penn State also reverse swept Maryland yesterday. That was another big-time matchup. I thought Maryland had them, but for Penn State, they were able to pull off the reverse sweep. Maryland has now dropped its last two Big Ten Conference games, but Maryland is still one of the more impressive teams. I think they should be ranked, if you ask me. I think they deserve to be ranked. The fact that they upset number 2 Wisconsin and they get no love is disappointing. They are receiving votes, but I think they should still be ranked. I don't think San Diego should be ranked, in my opinion. I'm not trying to bash San Diego, but I think Maryland deserves it a little bit more. But I guess they also want to be fair to the teams that aren't in a Power 5 conference. So there's that. And that was pretty much all the noteworthy matches. You also have some quick hits with Florida sweeping Georgia. Then you have Tennessee sweeping Auburn. That's not too impressive. And then Pitt sweeping Virginia, which also is not overly impressive. But now let's go over to the noteworthy matches for this weekend. So, noteworthy matches, in my opinion. The first one is an honor. I kind of view this as an honorable mention. Duke at Pitt, number 2 Pitt. Now, Duke has had a fantastic season, and honestly, I hope Duke can give Pitt a battle. North Carolina was able to do so, but honestly, I have Pitt winning this one if I had to put money on it. But don't be surprised if Duke does push Pitt, considering Duke pushed Pitt last season, and also Duke is having an impressive season, and they need all the possible victories they can in order to make the NCAA tournament as an at-large team. Because I don't know if they can win the ACC, but but for some odd reason they can, good stuff for Duke. Then also we have, and that's actually the only noteworthy matchup from the ACC. Going over to the Big Ten, we have Minnesota at Nebraska. Number 7, Minnesota is undefeated, while Wisconsin is 1-1. We'll see if the Gophers can stay undefeated in conference play. Wisconsin, I expect them to bounce back. That loss to Maryland is kind of their wake-up call. And honestly, I feel Wisconsin should be taking out their frustrations on all their remaining opponents. I also should note for Wisconsin is that they unfortunately lost one of their players to a season-ending ACL injury. They lost Daniela Hart to injury, so it's disappointing that they will not have her for the remainder of the season, and I wish her the best going forward. But I'm certain Wisconsin will be able to get back on track. Regardless, I hope. Again, I feel she'll be able to bounce back. So I wish her the best, and I hope that she'll be able to bounce back and have a great volleyball career. So anyway, onward to the rest of the matches. We have number 11 Oregon taking on number 24 Colorado. It's another big test for Colorado as they're facing another ranked Pac-12 opponent. I think Oregon has a lot to prove. They haven't really punched in that big-time win. They did beat Penn State, but Penn State has kind of been as of late. But as for Colorado, this is another match they have to prove themselves in. I think Colorado can win, but I would not underestimate Oregon. Oregon is a darn good team. Then also in Big Ten play, we have Michigan at number 12, Nebraska. Now, Michigan has been receiving votes, and I think Michigan can make noise in the Big Ten, but you look at Nebraska, they've kind of been on the struggle bus a little bit. They did get some good Big Ten wins last week, but against Michigan, they're going to need to go all out, considering Michigan does want to pull out that big-time victory, and I would not underestimate Michigan. We'll see, though. It's tough to win at Nebraska. And then bouncing back to Pac-12 play, we have number 15 UCLA at number 13 Washington. It's another big test for UCLA as they're hitting the road to Washington to take on the Huskies, who are coming off of 2 losses from the Pac-12 last week. So all in all, for the Huskies, this is kind of a big time they need to prove themselves match, because Washington has been a little inconsistent, and I think they're underachieving as of late. So still a lot of time in Pac-12 play, but for UCLA, it would be so ideal for them to move to 3-0, but I would not count out Washington. Never count out Washington. And then jumping over to the Big East, we have number 16 Creighton taking on St. John's. Now, St. John's is kind of a sneaky good team. In the conference, however, I still think Creighton or Marquette will win that conference. It's their conference to lose. But I'm confident Creighton will beat St. John's. But don't sleep on St. John's, and also don't sleep on Marquette as well. Then also we have Notre Dame at Georgia Tech. I'm still believing in the Fighting Irish. They did have a rough week, losing to Florida State and Miami, but I still think there is some hope for Notre Dame. I hope they can turn it around, because they have a lot of talent on their team, like Charlie Nigo and Caroline Muth, but they have been in a little bit of a struggle, so hopefully for the Fighting Irish, they can get off the struggle bus and get back on track to the W column. So I'm still believing in Notre Dame, but Notre Dame, you got to prove me right. Come on. And then on Saturday, we have, as some of our noteworthy matchups, Maryland at number 8, Ohio State. This is Ohio State's chance to prove that they are still for real, because Maryland is a very good team. As demonstrated last weekend, they took down number 2 Wisconsin, and they almost took down Penn State. But for Maryland, this would be a huge win under their belt, defeating another top 10 opponent. It would be huge, but they have to do so in Columbus, and it's really tough to win in Columbus, Ohio. So there's that little matchup right there. And then I kind of think this is an underrated matchup, Texas A&M at Tennessee. Now, Texas A&M isn't really the most impressive SEC team. However, I'm starting to believe a little bit more in them, but against a tough Tennessee team, they're going to have to prove themselves significantly. Like, Tennessee can make noise in the SEC, and I think the SEC is up for grabs. I still have confidence in the Lady Vols. They just have to play together as a team, and then they have to prove themselves against certain opponents. Like, Tennessee, in my eyes, can honestly knock off Kentucky or Florida. They certainly can knock off Florida, but against Kentucky, it's a rivalry game, and anything could happen, so I still am confident in Tennessee, so we'll see. And then another SEC matchup that's noteworthy is Ole Miss at Florida. This was kind of a big 3-game gauntlet this week for Ole Miss, as Ole Miss did suffer their first loss to Kentucky, but they're facing a reeling Florida team, which has not been good. And Florida, this is their chance to prove themselves that they are still contenders in the SEC. Every time they lose, I start to doubt them more and more, and everyone's starting to tell me that Florida is overrated and they're not all that special. I still think they have some good players, but the SEC is improving day after day. It's not just Tennessee and Ole Miss. You also have South Carolina that's improving. LSU, I think, still has something to prove. And then you still have Kentucky, which is still the top dog in that division. And then Arkansas is also a sneaky good team as well. So don't sleep on the SEC. Jumping over to the West Coast Conference, we have LMU at Pepperdine. Now, this is a sneaky good matchup considering this is a rivalry matchup. This is the PCH Cup. LMU hits the road to Pepperdine to take on Pepperdine. Pepperdine just barely beat Santa Clara. They had to reverse sweep them in order to do so. So for Pepperdine, they kind of got to mind their P's and Q's. They only have one loss on the season. That was to Washington. But for Pepperdine, if they want to win the West Coast Conference, they got to make sure they take down any of their other opponents. Because remember, LMU is well known for pulling off sneaky good upsets and giving teams a tough time. Hence San Diego from last year when they beat them at LMU in 5 sets. Speaking of San Diego hits the road to Northern California to take on Santa Clara. Now, Santa Clara, I think, is the most underrated team in the West Coast Conference. They have a lot of good pin hitters. They are led by Julia San Giacomo, and I really think Santa Clara can prove themselves against San Diego. San Diego, on the other hand, they have to prove that they are still a top 25 team. And honestly, if they don't beat Santa Clara, not saying that it will happen, I don't think I could see San Diego winning the West Coast Conference. I also should make note that BYU plays Santa Clara this weekend. I think they're playing either tonight or tomorrow. Regardless, that should also be a good matchup as BYU is traveling down to NorCal to take on Santa Clara. So keep a sharp lookout for that matchup. But I'm more confident in BYU than San Diego. Like, San Diego is still a good team, but I just don't think that at the moment right now they can win the West Coast Conference. And then we jump to Sunday. We have Louisville at Georgia Tech. It's a big test for both Louisville and Georgia. Louisville and Georgia Tech, as Georgia Tech has one loss. That was to a talented UCLA team. Louisville is number 3 in the nation, and a lot is riding on them to still stay at number 3. Louisville is also one of the favorites to win the ACC, but don't count out Georgia Tech. They have some good hitters, like Mariana Brambilla and Julia Bergman. And then Maddie McKissock does a great job leading the Georgia Tech offense. So for Louisville, they're just going to have to play sound, solid volleyball, serve and pass well, and just make sure they can limit those 2 pin hitters that I just mentioned. And then in the Pac-12, we have number 11 Oregon at number 19 Utah. For Utah, they still have a lot to prove to me. I think they're not quite ready yet to take down a big-time opponent like Oregon. But for Oregon, this is also a big week for them as they are taking a trip down to the Rockies. So for Oregon, I really think that they have something to prove on the road. And I hope they could prove themselves on the road. But for Utah, it's going to be a tougher matchup just because they're facing another tough opponent. And I think this Utah team's going to have to really prove themselves. They can't have lapses where they win a big game and then they lose a big game. They win a big game and they lose a big game. You have to strike that balance in the middle. Whenever you win a big game, you win another big game, and so on and so forth. And you also just can't bank on Danny Drews to just carry the team. It doesn't work like that. And then also, I missed this matchup on Friday. USC at Washington State is a big-time matchup. USC and Washington State are both opponents that were chosen to finish 6th and 5th. For USC, they have kind of underachieved. They did pick up their first big, Pac-12 win against Cal, but they had to go 4 sets, which isn't that impressive. And then Washington State also, I failed to mention this. Washington State is also playing UCLA on Friday as well. UCLA is playing Washington State on Sunday, and then Washington State is playing USC Friday. That's what I meant to say. Yeah, that's it. USC is playing at Washington State Friday, and USC has a lot to prove, as well as Washington State, because Washington State pulled off 2 wins, and they're not ranked. I know they had those 4 losses, but ever since those 4 losses in the beginning of the season, Washington State has yet to lose. So this could be the week of putting some respect on the Cougars' name, but this could also be the week of putting some respect on USC's name, because USC also has a lot to prove this week because they're too good of a team with all that talent to make themselves be sub 500 and to finish 6th in the Pac-12. And also something to note is that Shannon Scully has moved from libero to outside hitter, which was her primary position before going into Pac-12 play, as Brad Keller decided that it was time for her to move from her starting position at libero to outside hitter. Also, something to note is that Shannon Scully played libero for the U.S. training team in terms of tryouts, and I guess she is now back to playing outside. So I'm excited to see what the new USC offense can do, and hopefully they can go far because I have a soft spot for USC, especially since I know a couple of the players. Anyway, USC also plays Washington on Sunday, and then UCLA plays Washington State. If for some reason UCLA defeats Washington and then Washington State defeats USC, then Washington State and UCLA will still be undefeated. That would be really great right there. And that would be the battle, the true test for Washington State, because Washington State does have a great team. I was wrong about them. They had played stiff competition. They kind of underachieved, but then Pac-12 play came, and then boom. They were able to pull off some big wins. They beat their Apple Cup rival Washington, and then they also beat Colorado. So I think Washington State is starting to put themselves on everyone's radar. And then Washington, like I said, they have a lot to prove because they're 0-2 in conference play, and if they continue to underachieve like this, then the Pac-12 title will kind of slip away from them. But I would not underestimate Washington because they have Sam Drexel and a few other talented players as well. Anyway, I also should make note that on Sunday, Texas A&M and Tennessee and Ole Miss and Florida are playing one another. So they'll play each other on Saturday, then they'll play each other on Sunday. So that'll be that for those two matchups. And that'll be that for all the noteworthy matchups for this weekend. So now let's jump on into the Q&A session. Then we'll jump on over to the the story of how Set Point came to be, and then I'll let you all go. So let's jump on over to the Q&A. So the first point, I didn't get too many questions, which is disappointing, and there were no questions in the chat room, which kind of breaks my heart, but it is what it is. I mean, Spreaker, I don't think most people have Spreaker accounts, but if they do, cool, but if not, oh well. So the first question I got was from my buddy Brad Buckingham, who is the host of Northwest Territories Sports. I highly recommend checking out that show every Sunday at noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern. Brad does a great job talking about Oregon, Washington, Seattle, all kinds of Northwest sports. He asks, what made you get into volleyball and what makes it a great sport? Excellent question. So how I got into volleyball was because my high school, Newport Harbor, at the time was one of the more dominating programs in Southern California. They produced Misty Maytrainer and April Ross, and they also had a great winning tradition. And I first went to my first ever Newport Harbor girls volleyball match was in 2011 when they were in the CIF Southern Section semifinals. They were playing Mater Dei, who at the time posted a big upset over Edison, which was the number 1 overall seed. And by the way, also something to know, Mater Dei at the time was kind of in the middle. They weren't bad, but they weren't great. They were kind of meh. So I went to that match, and I just could not believe the thunderous spikes and the amazing digs and the blocks at the net, and then the crowd getting into it and just being so... It was an electric feeling, and I was like, you know what? I like this sport. I can dig it. So that's how I kind of got into volleyball. And then I eventually fed my appetite of volleyball by going to boys' matches. And I was surprised on how different boys' matches were from girls' matches. Like, I kind of feel that there's more digging when it comes to the women's matches. That's just my opinion. Don't take my word for it. But I feel also the boys are a lot more intense and there are more blocks at the net. So there's that right there. And then you also kind of have to factor in that there are a lot of players that are tall. Like some are like 6'5" or taller. Some can be like 7 feet. Like I did have a friend who played for Stanford, and this dude was 7 feet tall, and I was like, whoa, this guy is freaking huge, man. Huge in terms of height. Now, Brad also asked, what makes volleyball a great sport? That is another great question, and big shout out to Brad for asking me these questions. So, what makes volleyball a great sport? Like I said, it's just so electric, and you have to master the game. You can't just master it in one day. It takes time and preparation to master it. And I give so much props to all these volleyball players. Like, the fact that they have to just dedicate themselves to, like, training hard and preparing themselves not only physically but mentally to, like, getting better is just absolutely amazing. And the fact that they have to stick to diets, and then the fact that they had to just like, play in, like, multiple rotations. Like, it's not just one rotation they have to play in. They have to play in, like, 6 rotations and whatnot. And then every position is different. Like, you first have the libero position, which is basically the player that can move around and dig the ball a lot. Then you have the setter position, which in my opinion is the toughest position in volleyball, as that's basically the quarterback of the team, just setting up the offense. And then you also have the outside hitter, which is the big hitter of the team, the right side hitter, which hits from the right side, and also the outside hitter hits mainly from the left side. And then you have the middle hitter, or middle blocker, who is the tallest player that basically gets the blocks from the middle, and the tallest player that hits in the middle. Then you also have defensive specialists, or serving specialists, which also come in to like sub out for like any player, whether it's the outside hitter or the middle blocker, and they normally come in to like serve the ball, and sometimes they'll like help dig the ball, they'll help the libero out, but the defensive specialist is kind of like the unsung hero in my opinion. Them and the libero, considering the libero doesn't get enough credit as the hitters do. So to answer Brad's question, it's just a great sport that to me is underrated, that you have to just learn so much about, and you're basically moving all over the place, and you're keeping yourself like locked in order to make sure you don't let that ball touch the ground, because like I said in the past, volleyball is kind of like an intense version of don't let the balloon touch the ground, except volleyballs are coming at you at like possibly 100 miles per hour. And you can quote me on that. So that was Brad's question right there. Now we jump on over to the next question, which was sent by Mr. Adam Karnick, who is the host of Chi-Town Weekly every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 9 p.m. Central. I highly recommend tuning in for that, because Adam does a great job talking about Chicago sports and everything that goes on in Illinois and whatnot. He talks Chicago Bears, and I definitely need to hear his little rant about Matt Nagy and how he just wouldn't let Justin Fields be unleashed, and how he hasn't looked good, and how he could possibly be on the hot seat this weekend. But enough about the Chicago Bears. Adam asks, where is the best place to cover a volleyball match? So he didn't really specify NCAA or high school or beach. I guess I could like break this down into 3 parts. So we'll start with NCAA, because everyone thinks that this is just an NCAA volleyball show, when in reality, it's an all-volleyball show. Set Point is an all-volleyball show. It's not just an NCAA volleyball show. It covers all things volleyball. Anyway, so the best place to cover a volleyball match in terms of the NCAA, you have plenty of options. I'm a bit of a homer for saying this, but you have the Pyramid in Long Beach. Then you also have the Galen Center, which is USC. You have Pauley Pavilion, UCLA. Maples Pavilion in Stanford. Then you have Nebraska's Gymnasium. Then you have Kentucky. And then you also have other great sites like Rec Hall at Penn State. You have Columbus, Ohio for Ohio State, and you have all sorts of lots of great places. So in terms of NCAA volleyball, I'd probably say maybe Nebraska in Lincoln, just because that gymnasium is always loud. They have passionate volleyball fans, and I think it's a great place to cover it in terms of NCAA volleyball. You also can't go wrong with whatchamacallit, Rec Hall, and then Columbus, and the other places that I've named as well. So then you also have Fitzgerald Gymnasium, which is in Pitt or Pittsburgh, as that gymnasium also can get loud and electric. So there's that. In terms of AVP, in terms of beach volleyball, I'd say Manhattan Beach. Like, there's nothing better than California and its beaches, and Manhattan Beach is kind of the originator of beach volleyball, in my opinion. Like, you have so many legends there, and it's just a great place, and it draws a whole lot of atmosphere. And California, in my opinion, is kind of a hotbed for volleyball. But that's just my take. In terms of high school matches, now it's a little tough to determine this just because I'm located in California, and I'm sure there are like other great gymnasiums. I guess in terms of California, it would probably be the Miracosta High School Gymnasium in Manhattan Beach. Also, I gotta give a shout out to Holly McPeak, who just recently had her high school jersey retired by Miracosta High School and its volleyball program. So the Miracosta Gymnasium is a huge gymnasium. It's as big as a college gymnasium. So honestly, I think it's a great place to play, and it's huge, man. It really is big, and I think it was over $1 million. I think it was either $1 million or $1 billion worth of being renovated. It's quite a lot of money that it got renovated in. So hats off to Miracosta High School. I guess another noteworthy place to play volleyball in terms of Orange County would probably be Edison High School, aka Dave Moe's Gymnasium, as that is kind of like the mecca of indoor volleyball, whether it's boys or girls. And honestly, it's a great place to play. And I actually had a coach tell me that Edison High School is always a great place to play when it comes to volleyball. So I'd probably say Edison High School in terms of like volleyball in Orange County, indoor volleyball in Orange County, and also it's in Huntington Beach, which is also Surf City and also near the beach and whatnot. So can't go wrong with Edison High School. And then mainly I'd say Miracosta High School. Also some honorable mentions would probably be Mater Dei High School. That place is that's also a big time gymnasium, even though I think maybe it's for that gym is mainly big for basketball. And then Redondo Union High School is also a great place to play at. Although I've never been at Redondo Union High School's gymnasium, I will see to it as a bucket list, in my opinion. But those are kind of my high school gymnasiums. And I also can't go wrong with Newport Harbor High School. I'm a little biased for saying that because I'm a homer, but Newport Harbor with its low rafters, it just makes it tough to pass. And also, the bleachers are kind of close to the court. They're not overly close like it has been in the past, but Newport Harbor just has that classical feel to it. And then they also have an upper balcony set of bleachers as well. So it's not the best place to see volleyball by going on top of those on that balcony, but it's still rather good. So that's kind of my little top 5. It's in no particular order. You've got Miracosta, Redondo Union, Mater Dei, Edison, and Newport Harbor. So thank you, Adam, for asking that question. I hope that made sense to everybody. Now let's jump to this final question that I got from Seth Eves, who does a great job when it comes to commentating on USRN and all of our other sister stations affiliated with IE Sports Radio. He asks, and I like this question, can the Lady Vols actually make noise when it matters? Absolutely. They beat Baylor, they almost beat Pitt, and so far they're looking good when it comes to SEC play. I would not have them underestimate anybody, though, just because, honestly, they have their... Because, yeah, I wouldn't underestimate anybody just because SEC play is getting tougher and tougher, and their only losses were to Purdue and Pitt, both of which are top 5 opponents. Something to note about Tennessee is that they beat Auburn yesterday, which was Wednesday. This weekend, like I said, they are playing Texas A&M, which is kind of a little bit of a tough test. And then next weekend, Tennessee is hitting the road to Columbia to take on South Carolina. I think Tennessee can definitely make some noise, but their schedule is kind of getting tougher by the day. That being said, Tennessee was a first 4 team out when it came to the NCAA tournament. So I think this year Tennessee has a great supporting cast. They have some great returning players, and they got a couple players to graduate or to via transfer. So all in all, for Tennessee, I have high hopes for them, and I would not be surprised if they pushed Kentucky to the limit, because that matchup against Kentucky is going to be at Tennessee. So we'll see if the Lady Vols can pull it off. So to answer your question, Seth, yes, the Lady Vols can make noise when it actually matters. And I think they can beat Florida. We'll see, though. But that is going to do it for the Q&A session. Unfortunately, I only got 4 questions, which kind of makes me sad. I was hoping I'd get more questions from my Set Point audience, but I guess it's just not meant to be. I'm just kidding. People are busy nowadays, and they sometimes just don't have enough time and whatnot. So, anyway, now let's jump on over to the origination of how Set Point came to be. So, honestly, I still, to this day, can't believe that it's been 2 years. And it feels like I just first went live and I was having trouble just keeping everything together and whatnot. And I still to this day have a tough time keeping everything together. But honestly, I couldn't be more proud to do this show. And for those that actually know me, I did not start off with Set Point. I actually started off as a co-host for Bases Loaded with Brandon Buckingham and Blake Henley. Unfortunately, everything didn't really work out with one another, but it was all good. As in addition to being the co-host for Bases Loaded, I was also the co-host for The Defining Moment with Larry B. Eventually, he started getting busy, and I just wasn't going on air. And I told him, "Hey, man, you recruited me to be a podcaster, and I'm not doing any podcasts, and so what gives, man?" And then he had the great idea of giving me my own show, and then I was like, "That's awesome," and I totally accept. But there was one problem, however. At the time, there was a basketball show, there was a football show, there was a hockey show, there was a soccer show, there was a talk about everything show in Not When It Seems, there was a boxing show, and then there was a wrestling show. Well, there was Ringside Radio, and then there was Ring Rambling Radio. Or I'm sorry, not Ringside Radio, Ringside with Vince... I forget his last name. Vince, the sports governor. He's a part of BS3 Radio and X Squad affiliates, but he just goes by Vince, the sports governor. But I digress. So it was tough for me to pick a show dedicated to a certain sport. I'm like, well, Larry, what am I going to do considering all these sports shows have been taken? By the way, I also should note that I was also a one-time a one-time co-host for whatchamacallit, Fast Break, back when it was hosted by Phil Jones and Phil Robinson. Unfortunately, the Phils at the time wanted to continue to do Fast Break, but eventually focused on Unfiltered Truth, and they eventually left IE Sports Radio, but I digress. I was disappointed that I didn't get to host Fast Break, considering I grew up with basketball. I did not grow up playing volleyball. Everyone thinks, oh, this guy's a volleyball host. He probably played volleyball. No, I actually did not play volleyball growing up. I grew up playing basketball, so basketball was my main sport back in the day until I stopped being good at it, but I digress. So I was a little disappointed that I was not going to be the host of Fast Break, and I was truly heartbroken. But I eventually decided, well, Larry B actually had the idea of me being the host of Set Point. And he was like, you talk a lot about volleyball, and you're very good at talking about volleyball. Why not host volleyball? And at the time, I was like, all right, I'm in. I struggled with being with Set Point early on. At first, I still want to be the co-host of Defining Moment with Larry B, and I also still want to be the co-host of College Edition. So it was tough, and I still need to get used to having Set Point, but I eventually got used to it. My only problem was I couldn't find a consistent time where everyone would possibly hear, because at the time I was still in school and I had a 5 p.m. class, and I decided to put Set Point at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern, where everyone is either in school or they're either at work or they're just chilling out, maxing and relaxing, all cool. So it was it was tough to get used to it, and eventually, and also another thing was I was not good at managing this whole podcast thing. Like, I even made the mistake of doing shows twice a week. I did one on Monday, and then I also did one on Saturday morning, when I know darn well everyone is either at the beach, doing homework, doing schoolwork, watching college football, watching Saturday morning cartoons, eating Cocoa Pebbles, all that stuff. So I was so amateuristic. I was a noob back in the day, but I eventually learned from my mistakes. But something that most people probably didn't know is that I almost wanted to quit doing Set Point just because people weren't listening to me, and I felt alone. I felt like, what was the point of doing a podcast when no one's going to want to listen or offer me feedback? And I just felt like I didn't want to do it. I felt this empty feeling that I was like, maybe I should just stop. Like, no one's going to miss a volleyball show. And then I eventually wanted to keep going just because it just didn't feel right for me to quit. And this was like a couple weeks before COVID happened. And when COVID happened, I almost wanted to quit again. I was like, how am I going to keep Set Point going? So I had to think of creative ways to keep Set Point going, and that's when I had to think outside the box, and I eventually drew inspiration from the Extra Mile, who was having guests on their show, and one small guest turned into a medium-sized guest, which turned into an eventual big guest, and I had coaches as guests, such as Travis Turner from Orange Coast College, Ryan Windish from Irvine Valley College, Alan Knight from Long Beach State, Kevin Birch from Ohio State. It was absolutely amazing, and I was very excited to continue to do Set Point, and I was also excited that I was able to have certain guests on Set Point as well. And I also am happy to have had guests such as Craig Pizzanti, who we talked about TJ DeFalco and Josh Tuaniga, even though Josh was on the reserve team. And then also, I also got to make note of, I forget his first name. I should actually know this guy's name. Regardless, Craig Pizzanti coached 3 Olympians. And the fact that we were able to talk about TJ DeFalco and his team winning the SoCal Regional Championship was absolutely amazing on that 100th episode. And then also talking to Dave Huber about how he got to see Justine Wong Orantes win the first ever gold medal for the United States women's national team was also phenomenal. It was also great witnessing that moment for the U.S. women's national volleyball team. They had been long yearning for a gold medal in that after finishing with silvers and bronzes all over the place. So, all in all, I'm glad to have witnessed volleyball history in the Olympics this year. And this just goes to show you that this show does not only focus on NCAA volleyball. It focuses on all things volleyball, whether it's high school volleyball, whether it's college volleyball, whether it's professional beach volleyball, or whether it's the Olympics, or heck, whether it's the U.S. national team. I'm going to talk about it. It's not just an NCAA volleyball show. So that's my little public service announcement to you all. And people sometimes will often mistake Set Point for being an all NCAA volleyball show, and I have to correct them that it's not just a college volleyball show, it's an all volleyball show. Because that was kind of the first deal I made with Larry. He said, as long as you could talk NCAA volleyball and you could talk some professional volleyball like AVP, by all means, go for it. And then also discovering the NVA was a big plus as well, considering the NVA, I didn't even know there was such thing as the NVA. I know it's not the biggest league like the NBA, the NFL, the MLB, etc., but the fact that the NVA is starting to grow is absolutely amazing. By the way, there was news this past weekend that the NVA got a new team as they introduced the Colorado Kraken, which is absolutely amazing. And I hope my colleague Gary Funk will be talking about the Colorado Kraken sometime in the near future. And you can check out Made in Colorado every Saturday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So definitely do check out that. But back to the NVA, I was very excited to have discovered that league, and I also got a little bit more comfortable making short video clips about recaps of the Olympics, recaps of the NVA, and whatnot, and I'm hoping to do a recap of some of the NCAA tournament, or some of the recaps of what's been happening in the NCAA. And I also got to give a shout out to Andrew Hagenbaugh for helping me force myself out of my comfort zone. So I really was happy about that. And I feel a lot more confident in myself, and I'm hoping to keep Set Point going. And obviously, it's tough because iSports Radio, I do admit, is not it's not big time. It's not like a household name, but we're trying to make it big time. And if Set Point was an actual person and they had to blow out the candle and make a wish, the wish would be to be as big time as some of these other volleyball shows, whether it's volleyball podcasts or volleyball shows on YouTube, and to just get like the feedback from people saying, hey man, you do such a great job with the show, but you kind of have to work on this, and that, or anything like that. That would be Set Point's wish. And that wish would also go for iSports Radio as well, because Set Point is not the only show that wants to continue to grow. All of our shows on iSports Radio want to continue to grow. And we all are just a bunch of podcasters who want to help get iSports Radio's name out there, and we are for the people, by the people, and vice versa. So that would be Set Point's wish, to make Set Point grow even bigger, to make it a true household volleyball podcast name, and for iSports Radio to grow. I know that's two wishes, but they're kind of one and the same as well. Regardless, I'm still happy to be doing what I'm doing with Set Point. I know there are weeks that it can be tough where some people can listen, some people can't listen, but all in all, I'm happy to do this podcast. I'm happy to be a part of iSports Radio, and I wouldn't trade this for the world, and it's been a darn good 2 years. I also should make note that Set Point has not had a week off in over a year. The last week off that it had was the week of March 2nd, 2020. And with that being said, I'm actually going to take next week off for the reason of, number one, I think Set Point does deserve a week off. And number two, I'm actually going to be on 3 and Out with Larry B at 4 p.m. And I'm thinking, you know what? I might as well put off Set Point for a week. And Larry also encouraged me to continue or to like move set point to the following week. But if there does so happen to be a big time upset or a lot of upsets that happen, like say Texas loses or let's say we get another 9 upsets, I definitely have to talk about that, and I'll probably just move set point to like maybe 1:30, maybe 1 p.m. on Monday, just because I can't let that volleyball stuff go by, because if I miss 1 week, I'm going to have a lot to talk about and whatnot. So, with all that being said, that is going to do it for the 2-year anniversary of Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in, whether it was in the past or whether it was in the present. It has always been a pleasure to continuously put on for the volleyball community and to like put on for the volleyball fans out there. I know volleyball isn't the biggest sport in America, but it needs to be. Like, come on. That's why I encourage ESPN and all these other big-time stations or companies to, like, give us some volleyball. But regardless, that's going to do it for Set Point. First of all, I have a lot of thank yous to go over. First of all, I want to thank Larry B. for giving me this opportunity on this platform to do Set Point. I appreciate you, Larry B., and I appreciate all the hard work you do for IE Sports Radio. I also appreciate the listeners out there. You, for sure, are the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I cannot imagine this show not being listenable, because it would just be tough. I also got to thank my teammates for encouraging me, for sending me questions, for making my life a little bit more easier when it came to Set Point, and for tuning in as well. And then also I got to thank everyone behind the scenes, such as Andrew Hagenbaugh, and everyone at IE Sports Radio. I got to thank as well. And once again, before I thank the listeners once again, I gotta thank all my past guests. I promise y'all I'll get some of y'all your t-shirts. I will find a way to get everyone their t-shirts somehow, some way. I promise you. And if you were ever a guest on Set Point, I really do appreciate you. And I appreciate everyone who spread the word about Set Point. It really means a lot to me. Just because it's tough, because my main audience on Twitter they don't necessarily know I have a volleyball show, and they don't really care. Some of them follow because I cover high school sports. Some of them follow for memes. Some of them follow me because they're my friends. But I digress. And then lastly, I do want to thank once again the listeners, because without you, this show isn't possible. Every other show at IE Sports Radio isn't possible, and none of this is possible. But with that being said, it is that time, ladies and gentlemen, to drop that beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you once again for tuning into Set Point. I really do appreciate you all tuning in. If you listened on the live stream, I appreciate you. If you listened via the playback, I appreciate you. If you listened in the wee hours of the morning, I appreciated you. If you listened at any time, any place, I appreciate you. Shout out to my boy Marcus Losgreat in the chat room. Thank you for tuning in. Only guy in the chat room today, but what can you do? Once again, I'll keep you all posted if Set Point will be going live next week. If there are any big-time upsets, or if there are multiple upsets, I gotta hop on. But until then, I will see you all the following week. So have yourselves a great rest of the weekend. I appreciate you all for your support of Set Point. Continue to spread the news about this show. Continue to spread the word about the show. I want Set Point to be a household name one day. And I will see you all the following week. Have a great week, and I'll see you on the other side. Matter of fact, I'll see you tomorrow for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Peace!